Good afternoon, everyone. I can see a few of you filing in now. Thank you so much for joining us on your lunch break this afternoon. We are going to get started in about 3 minutes. We're just going to give the rest of the attendees a few more minutes to join. While you are joining us, we would love to hear where you're tuning in from. You can let us know in the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Thanks, Daryl from Tasmania. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Plenty more flowing in, which is great to see. While you guys are all tuning in, we would love to know where you're joining us from. You can let us know in the chat function at the bottom of your screen. We've got David, Ash, Daryl. Hi, Kerry. I also have a few polls to run just as we're waiting for a few more people to join. So I'll launch the polls now. Thank you so much for joining our Optimising Animal Health webinar. We have a few questions that Dr. Peter Hunt has shared with us. These are going to be completely anonymous, so don't worry about that. But the first question is just, have you experienced any resistance issues on your farm? And the second, have you had any problems obtaining drugs or chemical products in the last 12 months? Plenty of people answering that for us. Thank you so much. I'll share those responses with all of you in a moment as well. We'll just wait for a few more. While we're waiting for a few more poll responses, thank you so much. I can see a few more people have joined. My name is Amber Woods and I work on the marketing team here at AgriWebb. I've been on the team for almost 5 years now. I actually work remotely out near Rowena in northwestern New South Wales. I live on a property out here. Very grateful for my levee bank at the moment. I do have some pretty solid water views as we've had a fair bit of rain, as I know a lot of you will have had as well. Thank you so much for filling out the poll. I will share those results with you now so you can get an idea. I know Peter will be happy to see these. Perfect. We're at 12:35, so we might jump into it. Thank you to everyone who's let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat box. If you've joined recently, please feel free to drop your location in the chat so we can get an idea of where everyone is at the moment. For those of you that have just joined, my name is Amber and I work on the marketing team here at AgriWebb. I'm really excited that you've all given up your lunch break on this sunny Thursday to talk to us about optimizing livestock health for increased animal productivity. We're really excited to be joined today by Dr. Peter Hunt from the CSIRO. I'm going to introduce Peter in a moment, but before we do that, I just thought I would quickly run you through our agenda. So to start, I'm going to give a really brief introduction to AgriWebb. I know we have a lot of people on the call who are not existing customers of ours, so I won't take too long with that. I'll let Peter be the main star of the show today, but I will just give a brief introduction to AgriWebb, and then I'll hand over to Peter and he's going to run us through the AgriPest Challenge, farm management and biosecurity, and breeding for health. And we'll finish up with a Q&A. So as we move throughout the session, I'd really encourage you to take advantage of this expert that we're lucky enough to have on the call and drop all of your questions in the Q&A, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen. And if you can't find that, the chat will work as well. We'll keep a close eye on that and answer as we go. And if we've got any left over at the end, we'll make sure we get to them before we wrap up. So who is AgriWebb and what is our mission? A lot of you will probably have seen this screen before. We probably need to update it. I know this iPhone is a little bit outdated at this stage, but the message really stays true. Really, our goal is to try and simplify your record keeping, boost your productivity, and ultimately allow you to make smarter decisions on the go with real-time insights. So we're trying to get you to move away from manual record keeping, which is of course very time intensive, and allow you to not only just be capturing digital records, but making use of the data that you are all capturing every day. So whether you're focused on sort of compliance or grazing or just trying to improve communications and management of your team on farm, our goal is to be able to help you to bring that all together in one place and get you away from your top pocketbook and the depths of spreadsheets that I know a lot of our producers have previously spent time in. So today we're going to be talking with Peter about animal treatments and animal health, and obviously such a huge part of this comes down to compliance and particularly your inventory and what treatments you have on hand available for your livestock. So with AgriWebb, what it looks like in AgriWebb, you can streamline your inventory management. So there's no more scribbling down each treatment or the volume you have left of each treatment while you're in the middle of a session in the cattle or sheep yards. The other major benefit of knowing exactly what you have on hand is obviously cost. These treatments are often expensive. So interestingly, a colleague of mine that I was speaking to earlier today who has AgriWebb on their farm, they said that in the first year of having AgriWebb, they saved the cost of their annual AgriWebb subscription simply by having visibility of their chemical and treatment inventory. So they didn't over order treatments like they had historically done. So this is what your treatment or chemical inventory can look like in AgriWebb. It, as you can see, provides a pretty clear overview for everyone on the farm of what you have available at all times. So our goal is that we can do the hard work in the background and automatically adjust these levels as the treatment is added to your animals. And we even take note of things like withholding periods, and also, as I mentioned earlier, your cost of production as well, which is really important. So that is my very brief overview of what it can look like in AgriWebb to be tracking your animal treatments and managing your inventory digitally. I will put a note in our follow-up of this session where I will include the recording just with a few links to a few articles that will give you more of an overview if you wanted to dive a bit deeper. And then I'll also include a link to a free trial if you'd like to do that as well. So over to the star of the show. Next up, I am very excited to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Peter Hunt. I'm going to run through a short bio now, which Peter will probably hate every second of. Apologies, Peter. Peter is a leading animal health researcher at CSIRO with over 2 decades of experience in molecular biology, diagnostics, and livestock disease management. He's based in Armidale in northern New South Wales, and Peter's work focuses on reducing reliance on pharmaceuticals by developing innovative long-term solutions to livestock disease, such as immunological tools and genetic resilience. His research addresses real-world challenges facing Australian producers like you, from parasite resistance and climate-driven disease risks to the need for more objective and accurate tools to track and manage animal health. Peter is a key figure in the AgriPest Challenge, which we'll be speaking more about shortly, a cross-industry initiative tackling pests and diseases across plant and animal agriculture. He's got a background in both Australian and international research, including some time spent at the University of Edinburgh. And Peter brings practical, science-backed perspective to improving livestock productivity and well-being in a changing world. Very excited about our conversation today, Peter, and thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks very much, Amber. It's a real pleasure to talk to an audience like this. We don't get the opportunity to do it a lot, so thanks to everyone who's dialed in, and everyone who watches the recording later as well. A couple of points before I start. Thanks, Amber. I'm not a veterinarian. I'm going to talk about animal health, but I'm not going to give any specific advice. Obviously, these things are general in nature that I'm going to be talking about. And because I'm a researcher, I'm going to be leaning towards what research has done in the past and what research will do in the future. And so I can't cover every single thing. It's unavoidable. Obviously, I work for CSIRO, so there'll be some CSIRO centricity that's unavoidable. I don't know everybody else in the world, so I can't talk about everything that's happening. And I will be mentioning some products, not many, a couple of products. I mention them to illustrate points, not to endorse them. So that's not part of what I do. So we'll start with this AgriPest challenge. So it's a term that we came up with to describe the fact that ag chemicals and drugs are really important for producing food and fiber across the world, and that there are different forces that are affecting your ability to use them. So one is the supply. So pharmaceutical and chemical manufacturers producing things and selling them. So that's an important part of it. Another one is regulation. Um, are they available through the regulatory mechanisms that each country has? Research and development is important too, because without research and development, new products don't exist. And then finally, resistance. So some products, the products we use that aim to kill organisms, so that could be bacteria or insects or weeds or worms inside animals, those organisms can become resistant over time as their genetic makeup changes and they become resistant. And then those products are less useful after that happens. So we've been studying this scenario. We think it's an important reason for us to do our research, and which we're seeking to understand it better. One thing that's really obvious is that resistance and supply issues are the main forces in this. Uh, Research and development's slow. It produces new things occasionally, but it's by no means happening every day. And regulation similarly. Sometimes there are regulatory changes, but most of the time not. So supply and resistance, and that's why we had those two poll questions. So thanks to everyone who answered those. So it looks like about a fifth of you have experienced resistance in one way or another, and about a quarter of you have experienced issues with supply. So that kind of gels with our thinking about that. So the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus on animal health, and I'm really going to focus on infectious diseases, so diseases caused by organisms that are passed between animals or between the environment and animals, not so much on the metabolic diseases, but they're very important as well. And we can talk about them in question time if people are especially interested in them. Also, my experience is mostly with internal and external parasites, so a lot of my examples will come from those, but that doesn't mean that bacterial diseases and viral diseases and even fungal diseases aren't important as well. So the parasites are single cell ones like protozoa and also multicellular ones like ticks and worms and flies. All right, I think that's enough on that slide. Thanks, Amber. All right, so I might start with talking about treatment and prevention, and this is predominantly about products that you use on the farm. So an example are dips and drenches, medicated ear tags, many others. I mean, if you're interested in sharing, you might put in the chat other ways that drugs are administered to animals that you know about and that are important to you. And of course, vaccines are the second type, and many people use vaccines for bacterial diseases, especially, and viral diseases. And I'll talk a little bit in a minute about new research that's coming through on vaccines. The last one is biologicals, and then there aren't many examples of this, but we were involved in a long-term project that's released this product about 5 years ago now, called Biowormer. So that's a product you feed to animals. There's a fungus in it. The fungus hatches in the feces and kills internal parasites in the fecal pellet. So it's not a treatment for the animal; it's a treatment for the paddock and for the other animals around that animal. if you like. Back to vaccines. So there's been a recent advance in that there is a vaccine for a parasitic organism now that's available. So the Barbavax vaccine for Barber's poleworm, which affects sheep and goats, that's only available for sheep right now. We hope the future that can be used for goats. Um, that's a hidden antigen vaccine. And I just wanted to spend some time explaining the difference between that and a traditional vaccine. So in a traditional vaccine, like the 3-in-1 you might have received as a child against measles and other diseases, you get it, you might get a boost, and then you're immune for life. So whenever you encounter that virus or bacteria afterwards, you're protected. A hidden antigen vaccine is a bit more special. It provides you good protection for for a short period after it's administered, providing you've been boosted before, but then repeated infection with the disease doesn't stimulate the immune system to respond. So you need an added vaccine. And so the Barbavax vaccine and also the tick vaccine that used to be available in Queensland for cattle, they're both hidden antigen vaccines, and you need to administer them at the intervals that it says on the label, but it's a 6-week interval for Barbavax. So I just wanted to make that clear because sometimes that's a bit confusing for people. Yeah, I'll move on to the next slide, please, Amber. So let's talk briefly about data management and animal health. I think the really important thing is that treating, every time you treat, you might be selecting for resistance. So minimizing the times you treat is important. So knowing when you need to treat is the key for that. We don't need to treat unnecessarily. The other thing, of course, is every time you treat, it costs you money. And so Amber's already explained the inventory and keeping track of the products that you've bought. That's important for that as well. So those good records can be used for a range of purposes. Managing resistance, we've just talked about. It can also help with your inventory management, and Amber described that before. It can also be important to do resistance testing. So this isn't available for all the diseases for all of the animal species we work with, but it is available for some, and it's important to keep track of that if you have the opportunity. Also, of course, these records can be used for compliance, and there's more about that in the AgriWebb information as well. The other thing I'd like to talk about is individual treatments. So now with electronic tags in sheep and cattle, it's very easy to understand which animal you're treating for individual things. So for example, fly strike, if you are treating an animal, whether you've caught it in the paddock or it's in the yards, you can make a note that you treated that animal. We did a recent experiment with about 200 ewes, and we tracked them over 3 production cycles, so about 4 years, and we counted how many times the different ewes were treated for fly strike. It's quite interesting. We used the usual backline treatments and crutching to control flies. So 145 of our 200 ewes didn't get struck at all. We had 34 that were treated once, 12 that were treated twice, 6 that were treated 3 times, 2 were treated 4 times, and 1 animal was treated 10 times for fly strike. So think about keeping records like that and how that might change your management. That ewe that was treated 10 times maybe was not the best animal to keep in our flock. So there's opportunities here with the data. Right. Next slide, please, Amber. Sorry, I'm probably going fast right now. If anyone has questions or comments, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. I'd like to talk a little bit about rotation grazing. So this is really important for worms in sheep and cattle, but it's also can be used for tick control in cattle as well. The idea is that you move the animals on before the pasture becomes too infective. and those infective worms or tick larvae that are on the pasture will die if you wait long enough before you come back to graze that pasture again. And so it's a safer way to graze. It's important to use this so that you can minimize treatments again. It's all about that. Of course, the timing is really situation specific. So it depends on where you are in the country. It'll depend on the year you're having, and it'll depend on the time of year. So those infective ticks or worms on the pasture, they'll die at a different rate depending on how wet it is, how cool or warm it is. So it's important to get local advice about rotation grazing. It's not something any of us can do from afar. Planning production cycle is another thing. So it is possible to limit disease incidence by carefully planning things. We've got an example here, the graph there on the right. So this was from that same experiment that I shared the data about fly strike incidents. In this case, I've shown a graph on that each bar represents the average number of times that lambs were drenched, and that's the average of 4 groups in each case. The 3 bars on the left are the 3 years, 2019, 2020, 2021, for the lambs born in those years. And the 3 bars to the right are the same data, but for the autumn lambs in that year. So this was done in Armidale, or Uralla really, where we have a summer rainfall incidence where the winters are cold. And so Barber's pole worm especially is a summer problem for us, a summer-autumn problem. So our autumn-born lambs in this case needed drenching a whole lot less than the spring-born lambs, and that was consistent across an extremely dry year, 2019, and 2 very, very wet years following. So that was an interesting observation. So perhaps think about your production cycle and how you can optimize things that way. There is an important thing we discovered, I guess, along the way as part of this work too, and that is that the feed supply has to be also optimized to your production cycle. Probably not news to any of you, but that you have to consider that when you're doing these changes. Finally, I thought I'd mention biosecurity. Many of you have this sign on your farms. It is important. We do need to consider farm-to-farm biosecurity just as we consider, biosecurity at the border. It will matter. You guys are on the front line if something unusual happens. Obviously, look out for things like that and call the vet. And there'll be others who have given you advice like this before, I'm sure. Quarantining animals that you introduce to your farm is a good way to prevent the introduction of diseases, but also of resistant varieties of diseases. So for example, we might have a bunch of sheep that you've bought, and they might be having worms inside them that are resistant to a particular drug. It's possible to keep them in quarantine for a bit, to drench them, or treat them with a product like biowormer that kills any larvae that come out of them, to reduce the likelihood that resistance comes in onto your farm and then affects the rest of your flock. So quarantine matters. There are many, many other aspects of quarantine plans, of course, and I'm not going to go through them all. But again, if you're interested in them and you want to share, put that in the chat, contribute different ideas. It's really good to see those ideas from you. Next slide, please, Amber. The other thing, of course, that we can do to increase our ability to manage disease is to use animals that are resistant to disease. Now, it may be that you are a stud and you actively are pursuing selection for resistance to disease as part of your operation, but there might be others who can buy rams, bulls, or semen and increase that the value of that trait in your flock or herd using that way. 3 different types of breeding for animal health traits that CSIRO and me personally have been involved with over the last few years. The oldest of those is worm egg counts. So WEC is a trait for the sheep industry that you can select for, and the lower the WEC EBV, the lower the worms that those animals should experience. More recently, we worked with, especially with Australian Wool Innovation, on developing ways to select sheep that are less likely to have fly problems. And mostly this was around the rear end of the sheep, the breech, and trying to breed for lower wrinkles, because blowflies find those wrinkles irresistible. They're great places to lay eggs, and they're great places for maggots to live and affect the animal. So we developed this scoring chart, which is now used, and you can buy rams with EBVs for breech wrinkle. So that's another trait. The third one I'll mention is more recent still. So this at the moment is only available in Angus cattle. So this is the Immune Dex. So this is a selection for general disease resistance. It's based on a response to vaccines, and it's available. You can buy bulls with or bull semen with Immune Dex EBVs now. Hopefully, our future will see that being rolled out into other breeds of cattle and also into sheep. So that's some of the active research we're doing right now with many partners. I must say that work. Yeah, I think I might go to the last slide, Amber, please. So some take-home points, I guess. Some of these I mentioned only briefly, but I think they're really worth underlining. Read the label. So the label is it's a legal document. It's what you're obliged to do to remain within the registration conditions for that chemical. So it's important to read the label. It's important to dose correctly. All these things will reduce the chance of resistance evolving on your farm. Also, don't guess. Worm test. So that's obviously a specific slogan for worm control in sheep, but it counts for all disease treatments really. Only treat when you need to treat. So whether it's mastitis in dairy cows or worms in sheep, it's the same. Safe work, of course. Everyone wants people on farms to be safe, and there's advice on the label about how you should remain safe when you're using the particular product that's mentioned. And lastly, call the vet. Our vets are underutilized. They know a lot. They're trained professionals. If you've got something you can't handle, or you've got something that's unusual and you're not sure about, please call the vet. They're there. They're available. We've put a lot of effort in through Charles Sturt University and James Cook University to try and train more rural vets. So they're important people that we should respect and get their advice when we need it. All right, and Worm Boss there. I forgot this one. So one of the links Amber will be providing is a link to Paraboss, which includes a number of tools. So Worm Boss is one of those, which has a lot more information in it about worms. There's also Fly Boss, which has information about flies, and Tick Boss, which has information about ticks. So that's something that multiple parts of the research structure around Australia put together as a collaborative effort quite a few years ago now, and is a resource for you to get more information about those types of diseases. I'm going to stop there, Amber, and see what questions there might be.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you very much. We've had a few questions come through already, but just a reminder, we have an expert on the call. So if you have any questions specific to your operation or just general curiosities, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A or the chat. Peter, the first one is from David. He is wondering, does bioworm impact dung beetles and soil microbes?
Okay, good question. So no is the answer. The fungi are specifically targeting the nematodes in the fecal sample. They don't target the free living nematodes because the fecal sample generally doesn't contain those. I guess they could, but the fungus doesn't last. This is why it's a continual treatment. It kills the hatching parasites, but it doesn't spread through the environment and the soil. So it's not something that it does. It doesn't affect other organisms, so it doesn't use insects of any sort as prey.
Perfect. I just wanted to throw out this note from Stephen in the chat, actually, who's just said regarding parasite testing, elders apparently offer a free service. So that might be a helpful resource for anyone who is looking to do any parasite testing. We have a couple more questions, Peter, before we wrap up for the day. What role does breeding play in building long-term resistance to diseases like worms or fly strike?
Right. So I showed the two examples. So breeding for low WEC is one way to make your herd resistant to parasites, and breeding for plain breech is another way to breed a flock of sheep that is less susceptible to fly strike. We have never produced animals that are completely resistant to fly strike, but some animals are more susceptible than others, like my example that I gave about our experiment over those 3 years. Um, I think breeding for good conformation of animals is important for any sort of disease resistance. And of course, adequate nutrition is really important for any animal that's mounting an immune response against any challenge. So, keeping your animals in top nick is also another way to do things. So, genetics is important, but the environment the animals are in is equally important.
Perfect. On the note of fly strike, someone has asked, the fly strike vaccine has been on our radar for a while now. How close are we? What do producers need to know to prepare?
Yeah. So, we've been working on the fly strike vaccine now, our little team here and in Brisbane, for a few years, as the questioner said. Um, it's still very much in the research phase. It's not something that will be on the market in the next 5 years, I don't think, unless things really speed up. It's really being done on a bit of a shoestring budget, so the speed is slow. Um, However, we've made some good progress. We've worked out ways to test different types of vaccine, different antigens, very quickly and with very high throughput, using a lot less experimental animals, which is important for the cost of the work and also for getting ethics approval to do the work. So we're still working on it. It's still coming, but there's probably nothing to get ready for yet. That's what I'd say.
Diplomatic answer. Love that, Peter. Um, we had a question. Are there any new non-chemical control methods for parasites or disease that are showing promise at the moment?
Yes, so vaccines are our probably our best bet. So for internal parasites, for Barber's poleworm or Homunculus, there is a vaccine. It is a hidden antigen vaccine, so it's not as easy to use as traditional vaccines. There was a tick vaccine. It was there in the early 2000s for a little while, didn't have success in the market, but it also was a hidden antigen vaccine, and you needed multiple treatments to make it work. And so that is probably one of the reasons why it didn't succeed in the market. Um, the vaccine still exists, as far as it could be started up again if people really demanded it. Um, Maybe that's something to talk to your suppliers about. Um, the other biological control I explained there was the biowormer. That's specific for nematode parasites. Um, the other ways of non-chemical control are all much more to do with the husbandry of the animals on the farm. So, for example, for liver fluke, keeping animals away from watercourses by fencing is one solution. I talked about rotational grazing, and that's another way to minimize the amount of infection for worms and probably for ticks as well. Uh, there are uh, always opportunities to optimize the nutrition of the animal, and that can help them withstand infections, and that's really important as well. And I'd say the biosecurity things we do are really important. So I mentioned um, quarantine treating of animals that you've brought onto the farm, looking out for unusual symptoms. So they're two aspects of biosecurity. But if you go and make a biosecurity plan with someone who does that service, you'll see there's a whole lot more to it. Picking up carcasses of dead animals, removing them from um, exposure to living animals is one of them. Uh, Controlling wild dogs and foxes is important for hydatid control, and that matters when your animals go to the abattoir, when you see those rejections because of hydatid um, tapeworm cysts. So biosecurity is all encompassing, and it's intertwined with these other um, farm management ways of getting on top of disease.
Thank you. I did just want to note two things on that as well. You mentioned grazing and specifically rotational grazing. For those that aren't aware, I will just quickly do a shameless plug for AgriWebb. We have recently launched our grazing add-ons. So we have a grazing planner and a feed planner available. I'll put some information about that in the follow-up as well. But yes, just making sure that you are keeping track of those movements and monitoring your animals closely to give them the best possible nutrition. Um, and the other note was just that you can complete your biosecurity plan within AgriWebb as well.
Also in the chat, there's a note from Stephen about um, ATVs that people were bringing on for fire. A fire ant treatment team were bringing their ATVs on, and they had fresh mud caked on them, and he had to deal with that. Look, that's another big aspect of biosecurity. I'm sure it's in the AgriWebb system, is the come clean, go clean, message that's used most often to do with harvesters, of course, contract harvesters on broadacre cropping farms, but it equally applies, as Stephen says, for vehicles that are used on livestock farms. So um, that's worth remembering. Yeah.
Point. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this one, Peter, but I'll throw it out anyway. It's from Daryl on that note. He said, if entering vehicles are restricted to roads and specific areas, what is the risk of containments, etc., transferring more widely? Contaminants, sorry.
Yes.
Transferring more widely.
Yeah. So the best advice is in the plan, as you alluded to, but yes, it's possible to have like a quarantined area. So that might be the road, that might be your driveway, for example. That might be one side of the shearing shed where the shearing contractors park, where you don't put your animals, and you can basically stop any transmission of any disease to the animals that way. Weeds that might be transmitted that way, you won't stop them um, germinating and growing, but you'll know where to look, so you can perhaps get on top of them that way. So that's a good bit of strategy as well from that questioner. Yes.
You. And then we have two buffalo fly questions. So one from Stephen, how important is it to remove buffalo fly tags from cattle beyond the stated treatment period?
Absolutely essential, because it says that on the label, but also because prolonged exposure to low doses of the drug, or the chemical in this case, can help resistance evolve. So we want to get them off as soon as they've stopped working. Yep.
Yep.
Also, I'd say rotate between chemicals, and it does actually say that in the information about those tags, I know, but it's worth reinforcing that when we rotate between chemicals, development of resistance is slower. Yeah.
I probably should have done this one first, but can you talk about buffalo fly treatments in Angus cattle? That's from David.
Yes, I don't know that there is anything special about Angus. We need to watch out for it. I suppose the Brahmins may be somewhat more tolerant, but I think all of our British and European breeds are pretty susceptible. And these flies come and they definitely annoy the crap out of your cows, and the production loss is measurable. So our colleagues at the University of Queensland have measured that, so you can actually see production loss from buffalo fly, as well as skin damage as well. So you definitely want to be on top of it. There are multiple options. So the ear tag someone mentioned a minute ago, but you can use backlines as well. I think there's a few other options. Rub posts with chemical implant. So all those are out there. The number of chemicals available for buffalo fly control is fairly limited, and it doesn't appear that there's anything new coming. Um, so so yeah, really careful management will be needed. The other thing we know, and perhaps the viewers on this call know better than me, is a buffalo fly are on the move. They're coming south. Um, it's it's likely that more people will see them for the first time ever each year as we go along and the climate gets warmer. So really good question. Really good to be on top of that. Yeah.
Thank you. And then we just have, oh, a great note from Ash in the chat. Some northern producers have been adding garlic to lick supplements. Have you been involved in trials with this?
Now, as far as I know, there are no trials that have been done using garlic for any control of any disease. And that's a problem. So we don't really know if it works. No.
And then we'll just finish up with this one, I think. After so many amazing questions, thank you so much, everyone, for contributing. And thank you, Peter. Last one. What has led you to the conclusion that supply and resistance are major concerns over regulation and R&D?
It's really about the amount of experience people have. So in regulation, for example, I think in the last 20 years, we've seen one product restricted, or one active, sorry, restricted, and that was diazinon. Many of you might know about that. That happened recently. Um, in that same time, we've seen resistance evolve just in sheep worms against five different classes of actives. So that's probably 20 different actives. So resistance is happening a lot quicker than regulation change. And supply is a bit of a surprise. I think it's part of our new global world, right? I mean, we don't do any research on this. It's not science. It's economics and business. But more and more people are saying to us, especially when we're talking about rotating between ingredients. So thanks again to Stephen for the comment there. Oh, that's all very well for you to say, but we can't get them. And we can't do anything about that as researchers, but it's a real shame, because resistance management and just managing your farm depends on being able to access these different actives. And if they're just not on the shelf, yeah, it's a bit of a problem, isn't it? So um, we don't have solutions for that one. But I reckon, yeah, you all need to keep an eye on it and talk to your suppliers when you have an issue, because what's going on? I don't know.
Thank you so much, Peter. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for those questions. I personally learned a lot, and I hope that you all did too. Thank you again, Peter, for your time. I just wanted to remind everyone that I will send out the recording of this session this afternoon, and I'll send through those resources as well that Peter's mentioned throughout the chat, as well as a few links through to some AgriWebb articles as well. That is all from us. Thank you again so much for joining, and we really hope to see you on the next webinar.